In 2024, 295 million people experienced acute hunger, a population larger than the entire United States, struggling to find their next meal. When missiles fall on grain silos in Eastern Europe, bread lines fail in cities like Cairo and Beirut. The global food supply is so integrated that a conflict thousands of miles away dictates whether a family in North Africa can afford basic staples. These shortages followed a specific naval blockade that effectively closed every major Ukrainian agricultural port within hours of the February 2022 invasion. By sealing off the Black Sea, the Kremlin established control over the world's most productive agricultural supply line. To understand the impact of that closure, you have to look at the soil. This is Chernozem, a hyper-fertile, nutrient-dense black earth that makes Ukraine the most productive agricultural region on the planet. Ukraine holds approximately 1/3 of the world's supply of this specific soil. Before the war, it allowed the country's farmers to grow enough food to feed 400 million people globally. This map shows calories moving through the Black Sea. Ukraine provided 12% of the world's traded wheat, 15% of its corn, and half its sunflower oil. When the blockade began, these exports stopped flowing. Vulnerable populations were cut off overnight. The global market reacted instantly. The United Nations Food Price Index climbed to 140.6 in March 2022, the highest level ever recorded. Millions of tons of harvested grain remained trapped in silos, while the sudden scarcity forced the rest of the world to pay record prices for a diminishing supply. In July 2022, a diplomatic effort known as the Black Sea Grain Initiative opened a protected maritime corridor. For the first time in months, cargo ships bypassed the blockade to reach global markets. Over the next year, the initiative moved the equivalent of 18 billion loaves of bread. The restoration of that supply lowered global prices enough to prevent an estimated 100 million people from falling into extreme poverty. Throughout the deal, Moscow linked the continued flow of grain to specific financial demands, including the lifting of sanctions on its banking system and the restoration of a critical ammonia pipeline. These demands were reinforced by slow-walking the mandatory vessel inspections. At one point, more than 160 cargo ships were forced to sit idle at the Bosphorus choke point, intentionally bottlenecking the global supply. Russia threatened to withdraw from the initiative multiple times to create panic in the commodity markets. In July 2023, they allowed the deal to expire, ending the protected corridor entirely. The grain initiative functioned as a valve, allowing the Kremlin to regulate the world's food supply in exchange for geopolitical leverage. The financial impact was immediate. The moment the deal ended, the global benchmark price for wheat futures spiked 17%. Simultaneously, Russia began exporting its own grain in record quantities. In the 2023 season, Russian wheat exports grew 30%, reaching 51 million metric tons. The blockade of Ukraine removed a primary competitor, artificially inflating the global price, allowing Russia to sell its own massive surplus at a significant premium. These record agricultural profits provided a critical source of revenue to sustain the Kremlin's military operations. Russia eventually distributed a small fraction of its harvest for free to 6 African nations. This gesture allowed Moscow to build diplomatic soft power across the continent, while its blockade continued to drive up food costs for everyone else. The evidence shows a strategy that goes beyond military objectives. Russia monetized a global food crisis, turning the hunger of millions into a profitable geopolitical enterprise. This historical tactic echoes the 1930s Holodomor, when Joseph Stalin confiscated grain from these same Ukrainian fields to engineer a famine that killed millions. In the 21st century, the target has expanded. By leveraging a globalized supply chain, the Kremlin has used the disruption of Ukrainian soil to impact the developing world. This map illustrates a systemic vulnerability. The global grain trade relies on a handful of producers and a few isolated maritime choke points, like the Black Sea and the Red Sea. When one of these routes is blocked, the entire system faces a shock. We built a global food machine optimized for low costs and high efficiency, but we left it without a backup plan. Today, 24 million people have been dropped from international food aid programs because the cost of buying grain has exhausted humanitarian budgets. These hunger levels are the direct result of human decisions. from naval blockades, the manipulation of markets, and the reduction of aid funding. Addressing this crisis requires a commitment to resilient supply chains, restored humanitarian funding, and the resolution of the conflicts that target our ports and fields. Securing the world's food supply is a vital international defense strategy, a necessary step to ensure that human survival is never again used as a financial or political tool.